This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good evening everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Abom. We're continuing in Maseches Nedarim, Daf Hashavua, Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis. The Mishnah said, Nara Hamurasa Aviha Ubala Mafirin Nedareha. The Mishnah said, if one of them was mefer without the other, Lo Yufar. If one of them is Mekayimid, obviously Lo Yufar. The Gemara asked, how do we know this? How do I know that when that a Nara Hamurasa, the father and the husband is mefer? Because if you look in the Psukim, basically the Torah talks about three groups. It talks about a Nara, the father is mefer her Nedarim. She's totally in the rishus of her father. It talks about a Nara Hamurasa, and the Nara Hamurasa, it says the husband is mefer. Then it talks about a Nara Hanasua, and it says the husband is mefer. So it's not, at first glance it seems the Torah is saying that a Nara Hamurasa, only the husband is mefer. The question though is, if that would be the case, then why would I need to say a Nara Hanasua, only the husband is mefer? Obviously, if even a Nara Murasa, only the husband is mefer, then certainly a Nara Hanasua, only the husband is mefer. So the Ran said that the way to read the Psukim, when it says in that a Nara Murasa, the husband is mefer, it means and the husband, because it says vi. When introducing the subject of Nara Hamurasa in the second section of the subject matter, it says vi, it implies vav moisef al inyan rishai, not only is the father mefer, but the husband is also. So the Gemara says that the source is vim hayay sia leish unedareha aleha. This shows us that Namurasa Avia and the Bala is Mafir Nedareha. The Gemara says, well, maybe that pasuk is talking about a Nesua. No, it already says a Nesua, the husband, is Mefer. So then the Gemara had a question, maybe both are talking about a Nesua, and why do I need two psukim? The second section is saying that it granted a husband who is completely married to a woman is made for her Nedarim, but he's only made for her Nedarim that she made after the Nesua, not previous Nedarim. The Gemara said, She'ein habal mefer b'koidmin. It's to teach that the husband is not mefer the earlier Nedarim. So that's where we're up to. Now the Gemara asks, well, once the pasuk says that a Nesua is mefer the Nedarim of her, that a husband is mefer the Nedarim of the woman that he's married to fully, and he's not mefer b'koidmin, then we know that he's mefer the Nedarim of a Nesua. So then I don't need the second section. In other words, once I have the third section, and the third section teaches me two things. One thing it teaches me is that the husband is mefer her Nedarim. The other thing it teaches me is that he's not mefer b'koidmin, but that basically teaches me everything. So in that case, I don't need the second section. Meaning, then it comes out that the second section of the Parsha of Nedarim is completely extra. Let's see the Ran. Again, what the Gemara is saying is V'lav memela shamet mina. You can't say both Parshios are talking about Nesua, because then once I have the third Parsha, the second Parsha becomes unnecessary. Says the Ran Hamamela Shamina, de be'im beis isha l'chidei sagi de mashamine de bal mefer v'she'ena mefer b'koidmin. We could learn everything out from section 3. So that's how we know, basically this answer is saying, since section 3 teaches me that both that a Nesua, that someone who's fully married to a woman is Mefer Nedarim, and he's not Mefer B'Koidman, section 2 would have to be talking about a Arusa, and it's saying that both he and the father could be Mefer her Nedarim. Iba Yisema, or if you want, you could say that the second section inherently is mashma, it's talking about Arusa. Why? The Havaya Kedushin mashma. The word Havaya implies Kedushin. What does it say by the second section? It says, V'im hayay siya le'ish unadareha aleha. Siya implies Kedushin. Says the Ran, V'yibaysema Havaya Kedushin mashma hilkach al karchach laimatzis amrit ba'arusa. Now, so you say once it's talking about an Arusa, so maybe the pasuk is saying that the father alone is Mefer her Nedarim. No, because the Torah says explicitly the husband is Mefer. Meaning in the first answer, the Gemara was trying to say that maybe both Parshas are talking about an Asua and an Arusa, the father alone is Mefer her Nedarim? No. Al karchach leimatzis amrit ba'arusa av l'chudei Mefer, the Havaya Kedushin mashma. Alma benara hamurasa tzorich baal. We see that nara hamurasa needs a husband. V'leisagi ba'av l'chudei, and it would not be enough with the father alone, because the word Havaya implies Kedushin. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? Ema av l'chudei mefer. Maybe it means the father alone is mefer her Nedarim. So you'll say, how could that be? Doesn't the Torah say explicitly that in this case, v'im hayosiyal ishin dareh aleha, that the husband does it? So the Gemara says back, no. Im kain v'asra isar beveis avia heini oisa lamali. In that case, if it's saying that the father does it alone, then why would I need the first section? Im kain va'asar isar beveis aviha heini avia oisa lamali. Now, but let's just analyze this for a minute, because what's the Gemara's question? When the Gemara says Ema av l'chudei mefer, how could that be? Doesn't the Torah say? Doesn't the Torah say explicitly that the husband does it? Let's see the Ran. In other words, the Gemara is suggesting now that even though Havaya is mashma kedushin, nevertheless, it could be that only the father is Mefer her Nedarim, which flies in the face of what the pasuk says. The pasuk says explicitly that the husband does it. So see the Ran. The Ran says Ema av l'chudei leifar. Nearly the av l'chudei leifar hu dekashalei. The kivan de lo yatzasam rishus ha'av. Since she didn't leave the domain of the father, kidekasivna le'el, like we wrote earlier, bedin hu dematzi meifar. Aval aros lo, but maybe the aros cannot be mefer. Usmichusa d'vim hayosia hainu loymar the aros boi av. Maybe what it's saying is the husband, if he wants to be mefer. Yes, granted, the Torah says the husband is mefer. It means that if the husband wants to be mefer, he needs the father. Va'aros the kasar achmano loymar shem heikim hukam. The reason why it brings in the father is that if the father is making the Nedarim, then it's set and it can't be budged. K'damrin b'samach alei da'av. The pasuk says explicitly that the husband is mefer. V'yafagav d'ksiv aleha dimhayo isiyah leish v'chulu v'im b'yom shamaya isha yaniya isa v'heferes nidra. So doesn't that imply that the husband is the one doing it? So what's the Gemara's question? That very nice, it's talking about the father, but maybe it's talking about an aros, but maybe the father alone could do it without the aros. Very, very nice, we're talking about an arusa, but maybe the father could do it without the husband, but it says the husband does it. So how are you going to get around that? When it says the husband is mefer, it doesn't mean his hafara helps. What this means is ela she'im loy hafer b'yom shamai. If he's not mefer, nimsa shahekim. It comes out that he's establishing it. Delahachi b'lchud hu de'ukma b'rshusa da'aras. That is, for this alone, it's in the domain of the aras. For lav lamidi achrini, not for anything else. The kivan de layatzasam rishus av, since she didn't leave the domain of the father. Ein lechalas chus ba'aras. All the aras has is ela b'pachais shebeshiurin. We're going to minimize his ability to the smallest amount. What does that mean? It seems like the Gemara's question is like this. Okay, v'im haya isiyah leish is referring to Kedushin. And if it's referring to Kedushin, then it's saying that the husband is mefer and the father is mefer. So Gemara says, no, maybe only the father is mefer. But it says the husband is mefer. No, we don't really need him. What it's saying is, we're going to minimize him. We're going to say that really it's up to the father. Meaning, if the husband is mefer, we need the father to be mefer. But if the father is mefer, we don't need the husband to be mefer. We just need him not to be mekim. Now, it happens to be that if he's silent, that's a way of being mekim. But if he's not silent, because let's say he didn't know about it, or if he's mefer, then it's the father who's mefer. In other words, what we're saying is, just because we're talking about an arusa, doesn't necessarily mean the husband and the father are mefer. Maybe just the father is mefer. What is the husband's role? We're going to minimize it. Maybe all it does is we can have him confirm it. Confirm would mean if he says, I confirm. Confirm also means if he is silent. But if he wasn't around, then maybe just the father does it. That's the Gemara's question. And the Gemara says, no, that can't be. Because then, if that's the case, if we don't need him at all, then why in case 1, where she's just a nara, if we don't need the husband, then why would I need to know that a nara, the father is made for her nedarim? Obviously the father is made for her nedarim. The father even is made for her nedarim as a nara murasa. Why do I need case 1? Look in the lashon of the Gemara. It says Gemara imkain va'asra isar beisavia yani isa lamali hashda now yesh leimar b'makayim aros mefer av l'chudei. If even when there's an aros, the father is really the one who's being made for it. Shaloi b'makayim aros mibai. Do I need to say if the aros is not there? Let's see the Ran. Imkain. Why does the pasuk go out of its way to say that when she's a pnuya, Mefer Av la'ashmeinan hachi basar kra Devi'im hayosia. I could have learned it from section 2, from Vim hayosia le'ish, and I would have known that if b'makam aros the Av is mefer by himself, shaloi b'makam aros, of course the Av is mefer. So Gemara says no. Maybe like this. Maybe really the father needs the aros. Ema avli bayaras. Why don't I say that really the father needs the aros? Maybe by anara murasa, the father needs the aros, and really it's the aros doing it and not the father. So what is the father's role? The father's role is not really anything. The aros doesn't need the father, but the aros alone could be mefer. Look in the Lashon of the Gemara. Ema avli bayaras. Say the father, if he's mefer, he needs the aros. The aros alone could be mefer. V'chitema av de kaz rachman alamali. Why does the Torah write the father? Because we're reading it now that it's a vav, like the Ran said earlier. The vav is moisef al inyan rishain. That just like the father is mefer by a nara, he's also mefer together with the aros by nara marasa. So what we're saying, we're going to reduce the father. Mi boile de im hekem. What it's teaching me is that if the aros is mefer and the father is mekem, then she's stuck. We don't need the father to be mefer, but if he's mekim, if he certifies it, then it's going to be a problem. Says Gemara, v'chitema avdika. Again, the Gemara is asking, Ema avli boy aros. Why don't we say the father needs the aros? For aros l'chudei mefer. The aros alone can be mefer. V'chitema avdikasav rachmana lamali. And if you're going to say the father that the merciful one writes, why do I need it? Mi boile, it's needed. I hekem. Look in the Ran. I boys ema av boy oros aval oros l'chudei lefer. The Ran is going to explain that the Gemara now just completely did a 180. Says the Ran, mechichaza. Once the Gemara saw that the initial supposition that Nara Hamurasa lo yatzasa klal mishasav, that Nara Hamurasa did not leave the domain of the father at all. Lessa, and that's no longer true. The al karchin, because now we're saying kishanas arsa when she does erisin avl chudei lo imatzi mefer. The father alone cannot be mefer. Now we're flipping the question. Once we say that in fact she's not in the domain of the father, let's put her totally in the domain of the husband. The kivan shekain adarabba mashmeusa dekroi. The textual insinuation indicates that it's the husband that has control over her. The aros ikar, because all it says is when beisisha nadara, the husband is mefer. The av tafalai, the kiman the tarch arachman alashmina, the av mefer koidem shenas arsa. The Torah goes out of its way to say the father is mefer before erisin. That implies meklal de la'achar shenas arsa nafkalim mershuse. That implies after erisin she leaves his domain. The kiman the kasav kra behedya. Since the pasuk says explicitly the aros meifar, mashal dil chudei meifar. So why do I need the father? V'shud fasei the av delesa ela mishum vav moisav al inyan rishain mistayich. The only partnership of the father is learned out of the vav ve'im. So in that case, let's give the ikar primacy to the husband. So, and we'll relegate the father to second class, and his role is just that he's not needed to be mefer, but if he's mekim, then it's it's not annulled. Loimar she'em heikim hukam. Devadei pshita dekra mashna de'ars l'chudei leifar. Really, the pasuk, the simple reading of the pasuk is mashma. The aras alone is meifar. Ela d'loi matzina l'meimer d'loi shaykh ab benidra arusa ela aras. You can't say, why didn't the Gemara say, well, maybe only the husband? Because we already explained that. Then why do I need to know the father's meifar at all? Sagilan. We're going to reduce the father to the bare bones minimum involvement. Why don't we say that what the father could do is, if he's mekim the neder, it's established, but he's not needed to be meifar. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, if you want to reduce the father, and that really he's not needed to be meifar, but if he's mekim, it's hukam imkain beis isha nadara l'may kasav. Then why does the Torah have to write the third section? Namely, that if she's a nesua, the husband alone does it. If the husband alone really does it when she's an arusa, and the father is just relegated to a bare bones minimum, not that he's needed to be meifar, it's just if he's mekim, it interferes, then I need to know if she's a complete nesua, the husband alone does it. It's obvious. He was basically doing it alone as a nara amurasa. So I need to say that if it's a nara nesua, he does it. Imkain beisi shanadar l'may kasav. So basically, we have two extremes. We have the case of Nesua, where the husband alone does it. Nara Nesua, the husband alone does it. A plain Nara, the father alone does it. So what are you going to say about the middle case? Who are you going to give primacy to? If you give primacy to either one, if you give primacy to the father by Nara Murasa, then I don't need case one anymore, that the father does it on his own by a nara, because he was basically given the whole job as a nara muras. If you give primacy to the husband, then I don't need case three. You see, the father has locked in a regular nara, the husband has locked in nara nesua. You know what that indicates about case two? Case two, like the Mishnah says, Nara Murasa Avio Bala Meifar. They both do it together, but neither has primacy. Because if either is given primacy, then case one or case three becomes superfluous. So Gemara says, why would I need case three? If when the father has some rights, the husband does it on his own, I need to say where the father has no rights at all? Let's see if the Ran says something. We don't have to do that, Ran. But now the Gemara has another question. Ema in Beis Isha Nadara. Loimar she'ena bal mefer b'kaidmin. Why don't we say, no, really, I'll tell you that in case two, the husband does it alone. Then why do I need case three? Oh, you're right. I don't need case three to say the husband does it alone. I need case three to say, but he doesn't do it if the Nedarim were made before. Loimer she'ena bal mefer b'kaidmin. See the Ran. Ema in Beis Isha Nadara loimer she'ena bal mefer b'kaidmin. It's needed to be mamayit. Says the Gemara, that can't be umina, because then we're going to learn from that case itself. If you're going to say, that case 3 was only needed to teach me that the Nesua can't be Mefer B'Koidmin, then can we learn from that case Question, could an arus be mefer b'koidmin? Right, what are we saying now? Just think carefully. We want to say that an arus could do it on his own. And what's the father needed? It's only needed that if he's makim, he'll interfere with it, but he's not needed to be mefer. And the question is, so why do I need, in case 3, section 3, that the husband could do it alone? Obviously he could do it alone. No. It's not to teach he could do it alone, it's to teach he can't be mefer b'koidmin. Question, could an arus be mefer b'koidmin? An arus can. But that's counterintuitive. How could it be that someone who is fully married to a woman can't be mefer b'koidmin, and an arus who's only partially married to her could be mefer b'koidmin? You know why? Must be because someone's helping him out. Who's be helping out the arus? The reason why someone who did Nesuin can't be mefer b'koidmin is because he had no authority over her on the Nedarim she made before he married her. So, but the halacha is an arus could be mefer b'koidmin. Why? Why could an arus be mefer b'koidmin? But he also for sure he doesn't even have full sovereignty over her now. Why would he be able to be mefer the Nedarim that she made earlier? The answer is because he must be working in cahoots with someone who did have authority over her before. The father. What do you mean? I thought the father is not a relevant party. Must be the father is a relevant party. In other words, if we're going to say that case 3, what do you want to say? Really, the husband is mefer alone by Nara Murasa. And what's case 3 teaching me? That he can't do it b'koidmin. So can you tell me why in case 2 he could do it b'koidmin? The only explanation is because he's working together with the father. So he's working together with the father. That means the father has authority here. So the father is not just needed that he could be mekim, must be the father is playing a role in being mefer. Let's read the words. Umina, from that case itself, in other words, the nesua, not the nesua, the man who has nesuin to the woman can't be mefer b'koidmin. So then why could the arus be mefer b'koidmin? Arus mefer b'koidmin. You know why? Elalav mishum should fasei da'av. It must be because of the partnership he has with the father. Look in the Ran. Umina kolaymar mimai da'amrit debal ena mefer b'koidmin. The fact that the husband is not mefer b'koidmin. Shaminan, we could deduce she'ein arus mefer ela b'shfasei da'av. That an arus is only being mefer with the partnership of the father. Do'av v'arus mefer b'koidmin. The father and the arus are mefer b'koidmin. Kidemashma mi ve'unedareha aleha. It says, and her nedarim are on her, which implies nedareha shahayu aleh kvar. It says by Nara Murasa unedareha aleha. What does that mean? It says that if she gets married to someone and her nedarim are on her already, he could be mefer. Vehechi afshir the arus mefer v'leibal. How could it possible that the arus could be mefer her koidmin and not the husband? That's counterintuitive. A full husband can't be mefer b'koidmin, and an arus could explain that. How could an arus have more capacity than a fully married man? It must be because the arus is working together with someone who had control over her at the time she made those earlier nedarim. Lav mishum shitfasid av the mefer b'kulei digabi av leka koidmin. By father, there's no such thing as koidmin. The father always comes before the child. You hear this chiddush? First comes a father, then comes a child. A child never came before a father. There's no such thing as koidmin. There's only koidmin vis-a-vis a baal, not vis-a-vis a parent. Kei nirali perusha de shmaitza. Any questions?
You're changing the game. He has to be changing the case.
Okay, let's say this very clear. Case 1, a Nara, the father does it. Case 3, a Nesua, the husband does it. Our question is, a Nara Hamurasa, who's in charge? The Mishnah says they're both in charge. But the Gemara says maybe not. Maybe only one of them is. And the other one is just, the other one is just standing there to look good. Yeah, if they're making it, they'll interfere with it, but they're not needed to be mefer. So the Gemara basically says, if that's the case, if the father is the scarecrow, and we don't need him there, he's just standing there, and the husband's the one doing it, then I don't need to say case 3. Because if the husband's doing it by Namaras, he's definitely doing it by Nesua. If the husband's the scarecrow and the father's doing it, I don't need case 1. Because if the father's doing it by Namaras, it's certainly by regular Nara. So the Gemara says, no, I'll tell you, really, the father's a scarecrow, he does nothing. The husband does everything. Why do I need case 3? I only need case 3 to tell me that the husband can't be made for the earlier Nedarim. So the Gemara says, okay, that's not going to help you. You know why? Because we know that by an Oros, he could be made for the earlier Nedarim. Because it says Aleha, even the ones that are on already. There is no logical explanation for why a fully married man cannot be made for the Koidman. And an Oros could, other than the fact that the Oros is working in cahoots with someone who does have the ability to be made for Bekoidman, and that's the father.
The case had to be changed.
What did we change?
The father can't be made for her net. Can't be made for her nether if the father didn't. If the father wasn't made for her nether, the husband can't be mevatel it, even in kedusha. The father has to be made for it in order for it to be for the husband to be made for it as well.
Again, we're trying to prove they both need to be made for it.
But it's still obvious though. I mean, during kedushin, the only way the husband could ever be made for the nether is only if the father did it initially.
No, the Gemara questioned that. The Gemara said maybe not, maybe.
Then we came and said that the husband is able to do it during kedushin. How could the husband do it during kedushin? Because the father already did it.
No, but now the Gemara is asking maybe not. Maybe the husband could do it alone, and we don't need the father.
Do it alone because it's the third case.
So to that the Gemara said maybe the husband could do it alone. The third case? No, the third case is only needed to say he can't be made for earlier Nedarim.
Which means he can't do it alone. Only reason he could do it alone.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
The only reason he could do it during kedushin is because he did it with the father.
No. Maybe really the Gemara's question is like he could do it alone. Maybe he could do it alone. Why do I need the case 3? To say that he could only do alone the Nedarim she made and not in that state, but not Nedarim she did earlier. To which the Gemara says, the Gemara says, let's point out that by an Oros, you could be made for earlier Nedarim. And that only makes sense if the father is actively being made for. If he's not, then who's helping this Oros be made for earlier Nedarim? Join us at 10 p.m. for the Reb Chaim Falaji Yahrzeit event. Okay, Hatzlacha. Have a good night, everyone. Kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.